What was the thing you gravitated towards that helped you heal?
Oh gosh, music. Yeah. Music. I don't sing, don't write, don't play an instrument, but I love music. And I really found comfort and solace and an outlet in being able to express myself in my little notepads and then put them away.
How did you navigate then to building your own community?
It wasn't actually intentional in the beginning. It just came from a need to represent Black people differently and in a better way, and to give them space to grow, cultivate, connect, change not just everyone else's life, but mine as well. It's opened up so much for me. It's taught me so much about myself. It's stretched me in so many ways. It's been my bread and butter. It's given me job opportunities. Don't let fear hold you back. Don't let imposter syndrome hold you back. Don't self-sabotage yourself into not doing things. I said, God.
Welcome back to season 3 of the Move with Purpose podcast, and today I am joined by the fabulous Renee Davis, founder of Out the Box, a community builder, advocate, speaker, writer and editor, an all-round boss girl. I can't wait to get into this episode. Slight disclaimer, we're filming from our busy studios in the heart of Birmingham, so you may hear some noises along the way. Ren, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Hey girl, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you as the first guest to open season 3.
I know.
You're so multifaceted in what you do, and I'm always watching you from a distance and all inspired by your work. Take me back, Ren, to a time in your childhood that you knew you were going to be a leader.
You know what? You know when you mentioned it earlier, I was like, what am I going to say? And when you've just asked me that just now, I thought back to my dad always used to say, because I've got 2 younger brothers, we're like 2.5 years apart, but that's quite big when you're little, right?
Yeah.
And I was always like overprotective and like super caring of them. Obviously you don't notice it, but my dad was like, you're super caring of your brothers, aren't you? Like, you're super caring. But then other people will be like, oh, you're bossy. Yeah. You're always bossing them around, telling them what to do. But I think just being an eldest child in general, sometimes responsibility can fall onto you quite early. Yeah. And I think even just growing up with family dynamics changing and having to kind of like abdicate responsibility quite early, I think that definitely showed me signs of just, leadership.
When you say early, how early would you say? Because I'm an older sister and I completely get it.
Yeah.
Would you say you're their second mom?
Maybe at one point, not now. I wouldn't say now, but when we were a lot younger, I guess you could say in some ways yes. And you don't think about it like that then, do you? You just like, I'm just trying to help my mum out. Yeah. And I remember my granddad always used to be like, you're active. You're so active. You just get things done. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And even again, that's all signs of leadership, right? But yeah, maybe when I was younger, but now they'd argue and say, you ain't my second mom. Yeah. You know.
What were the family dynamics like growing up?
In terms of...
What would you say? Like having 2 young brothers, 2 years apart is close. Like I've got 2 under 2 and it's chaos. How would you say the family dynamics were with your mom having 3 kids?
I guess because you don't know any different. I guess you don't really clock what it is until I guess you look back. And I think because we had family around, we grew up in church community, it didn't really feel like it was too chaotic in the sense that there was always someone to look after us. We had a village around us to raise us and take care of us. We had my grandparents. So it was good. It was great. My mom will probably tell you otherwise. Like you said, 2 under 2 is crazy, but yeah.
And how did church play a role in providing that village?
So funnily enough, we had a set of relatives that so my granddad was a pastor. He planted one of the first Church of God of Prophecy churches in Warsaw. Okay. Well, the first one actually in Warsaw. So he grew a massive community in and around Warsaw, but we had relatives from his side that also came to the church. And obviously they're our distant cousins. So they would always play a role in looking after us, being there for us, helping my mom out. And you know when you're in church and you're being naughty, you got people telling you off. That's just how it was. It was just like, this is everybody's kid. Everybody picked me in the church. But church is my first idea of a community and my first look at an experience of a tight-knit community.
And when did that community and being in church really help you to develop your own relationship with God?
Funnily enough, it wasn't actually.
Okay.
So my parents divorced when I was 11. And so I think I had my first experience of wanting to become a believer at 9. Okay. And I say that because I remember saying to my dad, I want to be saved. Like, how do I be saved? And my dad was also a pastor. So he was like, this is the prayer that you say. So I think I was around 8, 9 the first time. But then when my parents split, obviously there was also the distance from church that kind of came in and happened. Yeah. And up until I was about 18, I always felt like I had like a borrowed faith. Okay. So I did start going to church again when I was around 16, 17. But it just wasn't, it was cultivating, the seeds were planted, and I'd always believe in God. I brought my friend to church actually. Like my friend became a Christian through me. So I'd always talk about God, but it was always head knowledge. Okay. And I don't think a lot of it translated to heart knowledge until I was around 18 when I went to university. Or 19, I'd say, my second year. And I was like, okay, you know what, God, it's literally me and you now. And I'm going to take this seriously. And it's been a journey, amazing journey ever since. So from knowledge to relationship. Absolutely. And it can be, like, when you grow up in church, it can just become routine for a lot of us. Like, we know the prayers, we know the songs, but that relationship with God is everything, isn't it? And once you know God for yourself, that's when I feel like you really experience life-changing moments. Yeah. You speak about your parents separating at 11. Can you take me back to where you were when you found out that they were going to divorce? I don't remember a specific moment, but I just remember the breakdown of it, if that makes sense. And obviously a breakdown happens over time. For sure. But when it did happen, it did feel quite abrupt in the sense of, oh, we're doing this now, this is happening. And as you do, a lot of things you block out, right? In a way, well, some people do, to cope. So I'll have years and seasons where I don't remember anything. Okay. And then I'll have seasons again where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that moment, that specific moment in time. And therapy's helped a lot with navigating that. But I just remember it just going straight into survival mode, like as a family, me, my mom and my bros, and it was just like, just getting on with it now. I wouldn't say there were any points where I got to sit down and think, oh, this is happening to us. It was just like, ride the wave, get on with it. What was your initial feeling? Sadness. Yeah. I think I was really sad. I was really upset. I think I was really bewildered. And because life had changed so quickly, it wasn't anything that I had time to sit and think about. Right. And I didn't really ask a lot of questions. And if I did, I don't remember them being answered in the moment, because I guess everyone's just trying to cope with a new normal, right? For sure. Did you ever go back and re-ask those questions? Yeah. A few times, actually. There were sometimes in points in my life where I was like, I don't really want to know because it's a bit too painful. But I think the older you get, and the more comfortable you become with the truth, and you want to know things for your own self because you're now navigating life in those ways. You want to know, actually, is there something that I need to know that can help me? Absolutely. So I think those are the conversations that I'm more so having now with, especially like my mom, and I've had them with my dad as well. And they're both, they're open and willing to share. But I think it's still a journey that I'm on in some ways. Okay. And even though there's 3 of us and we grew up in the same house as siblings, we've all got our own different experiences of it. Memories of it. We're all moving through it at different rates and paces. Yeah. And I think it looks a lot different for me because I'm the oldest. But we're good. I feel like as the oldest siblings, we wear a lot of things that our younger siblings often don't realise. So it's funny you mentioning that dynamic, because I was having a conversation with my little brother a couple of weeks ago. He's 6 years younger than me. And we were speaking about the time where our parents split,
And he has a complete different take on it to me.
Exactly.
Complete different take.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when we sat down and we were kind of going back and forth, he was like, "Man, you became very sharp with me and you were very like harsh and overprotective."
Yeah.
And it almost felt like his memory of that situation was me as the villain.
Yeah.
And I was like, bro, you don't even know half
Yeah.
the things that I was protecting you from.
Yeah.
And he had to circle back and he was like,
Yeah.
rah, when I told him, man, thank you.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that.
Have you had to have a similar conversation with your brothers?
Absolutely. One in particular, I think, I'd say about 5 years ago. And I understand it as well because, you know, when you're older and you're feeling like you're bearing the brunt of things, you do become angry as a young person. And I think one of the things that I do know came up for me a lot was anger and frustration. And obviously because they're there and we're really close, obviously I would take a lot of things out on them sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know it affected them in different ways, but it still had an effect. And I still do have to answer for it as the oldest, even though I was a child myself. But I think, like you, it just takes having conversations, and it just takes saying, actually, well, this is what I was dealing with. Doesn't make it right, maybe. But I didn't even know who I was or what I was doing or how I was feeling. I didn't know how to process. I didn't have anyone to go to, especially being the oldest. And you just have to do your best to have those conversations and then navigate life from that point on. And actually, I think the older you get, you come to more of an understanding of what actually transpired to cause the fragments. And it does change your relationship dynamic in a way where you can start having those honest conversations and being like, okay, this is how we're going to move forward now and move through it. So, yeah.
Would you say you bared adult experiences as a child, and how did you navigate that?
Definitely, even just little things like, you know, mom would go to work and then it would be like, Ren, you're going to cook this tonight when you come home from school so you and your brothers can eat. And back then it's just like, okay, because how else are we going to eat? And I guess I didn't necessarily look at them as adult things, but I knew it was different to what some of my friends would have to do. That I grew up in my area with. So that does kind of get your head screwed on very quickly. You do become very vigilant. You do become very self-sufficient and independent, just having to take on a lot of those responsibilities. And there were other things that I don't necessarily want to touch on now, but that, for example, just kind of being like a second set of eyes or second caretaker. And we had our grandparents as well, but there was only so much that they could do. And they did a lot, but for sure, definitely took on.
I can resonate with that. And I almost feel like I've spent a lot of time in therapy, going back and just realising that I was carrying my parents' trauma as a child. And how it affected me into adulthood was I almost had become neglected myself in the process of picking up everybody else's pieces, if that makes sense. What has been a pivotal finding through therapy for you?
Of my younger years? I think similar to what you said, where, how do I put this? Where some things that I did experience and go through weren't necessarily things that I could have took blame for. And it's not that my parents were blaming me for anything, but when things happen, you do start to take on some sort of blame in some ways because you think, oh, well, you know, there were certain situations where I'm like, that could have been avoided if I did this. But I was a child. Do you get what I mean? And obviously, when people are going through divorce, they're also going through their own pain and hurt and not really realizing where they are and what's affecting them in that time. So then how much more the kids? So there were certain situations that happened where I grew up just thinking, well, if I didn't do this, then maybe me and my mom would have had a better relationship, or maybe me and my mom wouldn't have butted heads at that point in time for as long as we did. But actually, it's not something that I should take responsibility for. It was just
sure.
an effect of the situation as a whole on everyone.
What was healing for you? What was the thing you gravitated towards that helped you heal?
Oh gosh, music. Music. I don't sing, don't write, don't play an instrument, but I love music.
Right.
Like inside out. I'd shut myself in my room. My mum bought me like a little hi-fi. Remember the hi-fis back in the day? And I remember one that she bought me, I think it was either for my birthday or Christmas.
Yeah.
And my mum would also like buy me albums. So sometimes she'd come home from work. Bless her, she'd always come home from work with something little for us when she could. And she'd buy me albums in particular because she knew she's just going to listen to that all for ages, just rinse it out. Rinse out the albums. And I found a lot of solace in just sitting and listening to music. And I started journaling when I was 11 or 12. And I'm 35 now.
Have you still got those notepads?
Absolutely, and I still journal the same way I did to this day. I'm an avid journaler. And I didn't know what it was back then. It wasn't branded, because now it's a whole branded thing, isn't it? Like journaling, it wasn't
with the
that.
pretty notepads and the pens to match.
Yeah, back then it was like, if I don't write about some of the stuff that I'm feeling, where am I going to dump all of this? And I really found comfort and solace and an outlet in being able to express myself in my little notepads and then put them away. And it's a practice that I developed over time and still use to this day.
Have you ever revisited those notes?
Yeah. I don't all the time. Because I feel like God, I kind of go back when I feel like God's pulling on me to go and revisit some things.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what you don't remember
until you read
it. And I've found even going back and reading certain things has brought me a lot of clarity, actually, and understanding. And that's why I always advocate for journaling, because I'm like, if you're stuck in a situation, write about it and then revisit it, and your answer's there. Your answer is always there in the journal.
Have you ever found that when you revisit a thing, the pain resurfaces, and how have you managed
Sometimes,
that?
Sometimes it does. But actually, lately, I've found that what's resurfacing for me is gratitude.
Wow.
And a different kind of reverence for God and his sovereignty and what he allowed to happen. That I thought, well, you know, you didn't have to do that, God. You didn't have to let that one slide. Like, why did you let that slide? Actually, it's like, I don't make mistakes. So this was meant to happen. There's nothing for me to be sorry for.
Yeah.
This is something that you've just had to mature, look back with hindsight and realize it was for your good.
Has that, the same way that you've had this gratitude for God, has it impacted any of your relationships this way with family, looking back and going, okay?
Yes, I think it's allowed me to give more grace. I think it's, and this is only in recent years actually, that I've started to think about it, put myself in like maybe some of the adults around me, put myself in their shoes and think, well, if they were going through that with children in tow, or if they were watching their sister go through that with their, you know, with their nieces and nephews, and it's a painful time for everyone, they were probably doing what they thought was best at the time.
Yeah.
Because we're humans, we make mistakes. And I'm probably around the same age as my parents were when they divorced. And I think about how would something like that impact me now? Would I have made the same decisions or different?
Yeah.
But I think just putting myself in their shoes has given me the space to give them a little bit more grace and let people, not just them, but other people off the hook as well.
I'm hearing forgiveness as well.
Yeah, I think it's more forgiveness for what happened, or for the whole thing, for everything. And I remember there was a point in time about 3 years ago where I was having these conversations with my siblings, and I remember trying to offer different perspectives actually. And even though I'm like, we're right to feel how we feel, but this, do you get what I mean? And it actually was, that was it was a tough time, but it was a really healing time, because I realized actually we're having conversations that we should have probably had a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think that came through my journey in therapy. That came through my understanding of life and being human and being flawed and being imperfect. And I guess being able to offer just a totally different perspective.
And I feel like our responsibility as older siblings does that.
Yeah.
We 100%, like once we have a life learning, we're able to kind of gear our siblings in the right way. I find myself doing this for my brother all the time. Like if I'm Bex, I can get him Bex so quickly.
Yeah.
In the same way that if I want him to have a new learning of something, I'm like, Joe, come on, get on the same page. So that responsibility can sometimes weigh on your shoulders. How did you navigate then to building your own community? So how did you use those experiences to say, do you know what? I'm going to build this community for this said reason.
I wouldn't necessarily say the building of my community came from that, but I would say I feel like I have a duty of care for people in general. And I can't see something's wrong and leave it, if that makes sense. So I think that does probably come from the experiences that shaped me as a child and as a teenager, and even just with my friendship circles when I was younger. But I think for me, the reason why I shaped the Out the Box community, it wasn't actually intentional in the beginning. It just came from a need to represent Black people differently and in a better way, and to give them space to grow, cultivate, connect, be all that they want to be outside of the eyes of the system.
Right.
And I, again, it came as me finding solace for myself and comfort in myself. Backstory. So when I was at university, I was studying my media and journalism degree. And it's funny because I was always writing about the Black community. I was always writing about things that pertain to us. And I would be loving it, hand it in, and it's like terrible grade. And I'd be like, why? What's wrong with you? What's going on with you guys?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. We don't understand the subject matter. So I started a blog because I said, I'm not about to come to uni, waste up my good money. Do you know what I mean? Waste up my, the good loan to drop out and feel like I can't do this because my lecturer said it doesn't make sense.
Right.
So I set up a blog called Out the Box because I felt boxed in. So it was for me, actually. This was for me to keep my craft in tune, to fine tune it, to find my tone of voice and my writing style. And then I was like, well, actually, let me see if I can interview my friends and interview extended family members about the things that they're building and that they're doing. I'd write about things on TV, do a little bit of social commentary. I'd write about myself, my journey. And I left that alone for a few years. And then when I moved to London, I remember God tugging at me again to restart it, but to use it as on a broader scale, and to empower young Black people and to fuel their dreams, to inspire their greatness. And I remember the strongest I felt about it was when the riots happened in 2011. And I don't know if you remember when the police killed Mark Duggan. And then there was the looting happening. This was happening across every city in the UK. And you switch on the TV and then it would be like, these are the perpetrators. And I see young Black people and I just think, we're not just this. And why is it the only time that we're getting extended coverage? Why is it when it's for something bad? Why do we only see ourselves on TV when it's to do with music or when it's to do with sports or when it's to do with, Hollywood? Why can't it be businesses? Why can't it be other things? And I remember when Jamal Edwards, rest his soul, I remember when he put out that Google ad talking about SBTV, and I was like, right, let me pull my socks up. And eventually, a few years later, I set up Out the Box as a website with inspiring stories of people in the community doing different things. This was, I interviewed filmmakers, I interviewed friends that had fashion lines, I interviewed my friend that was a hairstylist, put all their stories on the website to say, look at us, look what we can do. I want you to be inspired as well.
Did you ever have a vision of where it was going to go?
No.
Or was this just purely passion?
It was purely passion. And when I started to see the need and the response to what I was building, I just started to move in accordance to that.
Okay.
So the way the community came about was when we started to do events, because I was like, well, it's not enough to just have a website with inspiring stories, because that's nice and everything. But when people put down their phone or close their laptop,
then what?
So I said, let's get everyone in a room. And I remember speaking to my friend, and he was kind of giving me guidance on kind of like how to build it as a business. And then the event talk came up and I was like, I don't know if I can do events. I don't know how to do that. I've never done anything like that in my life. And with Out the Box, everything has been, I've taught myself, I've trained myself, I've collaborated with other people, I've winged it, trial and error. I'm still winging it now. And yeah, that's when the community started to build, and the buzz came was when we started to build spaces for people to come and build experiences.
What has been the biggest growing pain for you in building a business?
Trying to overcome myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Like get out your own way?
Get out of my own way. And I think there's some days I sit and think, if I'd have just bit the bullet then and did this then maybe. But, and I don't regret anything, because everything teaches me something. But I really do think that we can be our own worst enemy sometimes, through self-sabotage, through letting imposter syndrome get the better of us, through, taking our eyes off of our lane and looking at other people and looking at, well, what if I do it like this? When I feel like when you take your eyes off of what God's asked you to do, it can be very chaotic.
What has that looked like for you?
I think it's just really looks like, I'd say, things moving slow.
Okay.
I'd say it's really looked like missed opportunities.
Yeah.
But you would never be able to tell that on the surface. And these are silent lessons that I've been really sitting with myself and dissecting and reflecting on. And I'm like, actually, I do need to talk about this, because I think it can help other people to understand that people aren't looking at you like you think they are. They're looking at you because they know that you carry a gift that can help them, but they're not, you do have random people that want you to fail, but who cares about them? There's so many people that are relying on you and waiting on you, and you do have to always remind yourself that it's not about me.
Right.
And I think that's what helps me move out of my own way, is to just be like, pull your socks off, put your big girl pants on, think about the people that you've still got left to affect, that still need what you're carrying.
And that's so pivotal, because I feel like we do a good job now of sharing a lot of our wins. I'm an advocate for this. We share our socials and our websites look so glossy, and our awards and our accolades. But when the people coming after us need to leverage off our failures, right? What has been your biggest failure, so to speak, would you say?
I wouldn't say there's been any major failures. I think it really just does come back to maybe the things I didn't do.
Okay.
I think there's that, but I think there's always been a way of redemption somewhere.
Yeah.
Like God will be like, come on, you didn't do it this time, but come on, here's another opportunity to get this right.
Is there a certain missed opportunity you look back and go, oh, damn, if I would have just took it then?
You know what? I've been really reflecting on this lately. And for me, I think my biggest thing has been, there's been a lot of almosts.
Oh, okay.
So let me not say missed opportunities.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of almosts that I think, to say like, if, all right, there's been companies that have approached us and they're like, we want to work with you in this way. We want to build our pipeline of Black talent.
Okay.
How do we work together and do this? And then they might have gone a little bit AWOL, as some of them do. And sometimes, and then I'll see them popping up now. I'm not going to name names, but I'll see some of them popping up now and doing similar things as to what we spoke about years ago. And I'm like,
okay.
but I also, but I also do know that whereas I might have sent them a couple of follow-up emails, I should have been going to the office and being like, hi, do you remember me? Could we pick up where we left off? I feel like I really should have pushed a bit more sometimes. And I've always had this tendency since I was a little girl where if I feel like it didn't work out a few times, then I'll just be like, well, I can't do it. Maybe I just should just leave it. And I think I'd flip the failure word and just say they were almost, but they're things that I've learned lessons from. And some things aren't a fit. Don't get me wrong. Some things weren't meant to happen, but some things I do still have a question mark on it. And I'm like, that didn't have to be almost. Yeah, we could have. Yeah, it could have happened.
Does that cause you to be a bit more tenacious now? Like if you see an opportunity come up and you're like, if it's the right fit, let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Yeah. Because one of the things I've noticed is when you're working with bigger organizations, they're always thinking about the next thing. So they're not necessarily looking at it like, oh, we've gone AWOL. It's just like, okay, we've reviewed budgets, we've spoken to the board or the team. We're not going to do that anymore. And on to the next thing.
Right.
Whereas you can't even really be taking some of these things personally, to be honest. You do have to just pick yourself back up and, like you said, have a different style of tenacity. And I think now, I'd say for the last 3 years, God's really had me on a journey of reviewing my purpose and re-reviewing why I do what I do and what it's really about. Okay. And a lot of the things that I used to think, a lot of the ideals that I had, some of my mission statements have really changed. A lot of these things that I used to think don't matter to me anymore.
Is that God pulling you back into alignment?
Yeah.
As the founder and the CEO?
Yeah. And he still has to carry out his purpose in the world.
Yes.
And I feel like there's a lot of, I think my thing at the moment is, who are we missing out there? Who are we not reaching? Who are we not tapping into? Like you said, social media can make you think it has to be all about super hustle culture, go big or go home. And while those things are important for us as a community, I also think, what about the people that can't be in rooms like we are? We're in all these great rooms, but there's people at home that are just imagining what it would be like.
Yeah.
What about them? And I think that's the level of thinking that I've kind of been taking on recently. And I work in the social justice space as well. So I work with a foundation and we work in systems change. So we look at the system as a whole. And that's really also, I think they've both informed each other, but where we are as an organization at the moment has also informed the level of thinking that I now have around the business and out the box. So
do you know what I've found over the past couple of months? Yeah. That good work is not God work.
Absolutely.
So we often have times in our business where we're like, oh, we're doing great things, and personally as well, but it's not always God work.
No.
And sometimes our visions and our goals are great, and on the outside, people are like, congratulations. And then there's that inner feeling of, but is God pleased? Would you say that God is pleased at the moment with where your business is at and where you're now driving in this new mission?
Yeah, I do. And I was reflecting back to 2018. So I just left my journalism job that I was working at for 7 years full time. Great years, great opportunities. I got to travel. I got to interview some of the best gospel artists, politicians. I was in the Houses of Parliament regularly. Wow. Things that you could only dream of doing in like you early to late 20s. And I handed in my notice because I think around that time I'd been building out the box for probably a few years at that point. And I just really felt the pull to just go at it full force. Okay. And you know when you're just full of vim and you're just like, yeah, I can do this, I'm going to do this. And it was one of the hardest years I ever had in terms of I used to be quite the perfectionist, still battle with it sometimes. And by that point as well, you've got a whole community looking at you. Yeah. People think you're doing really well and you don't want to come across like you're struggling. And I just struggle with that in general. And I remember coming out of that year and being like, I would have survived this year pretty well if I'd have just opened my mouth and said, I need some help.
Yeah.
I'm not doing well in this area. And, you know, when I say I wasn't doing well, I felt like I wasn't getting enough work in business-wise. And that meant financially it was a bit quite tight.
Yeah.
And I was juggling. I was doing some other bits of work on the side, but we were still actually running a lot of out the box workshops. So it was a great year for out the box. Yeah. And in terms of our exposure and the workshops that we were doing, and we were still helping people and equipping people with skills, but I was imploding basically.
You personally?
I was imploding. And coming back to the point of God being pleased, I felt like, oh, I've really messed this up, haven't I? I fluffed it. And my pastor sent me a DM, and he was always really encouraging of out the box, but he didn't know what was going on. He could just only kind of see like the surface, the workshops, the outputs, me probably going on a few podcasts, doing a few talks. And I remember at the time, I had a nanny job. I was doing some nannying as well. I was working with 2 young kids. Loved them to bits. And I used to pick them up from school. So I was picking them up working on out the box, sorting out the events, probably working with a few clients that I had, picking them up from school, taking them to their after school activities, taking them to the park, on my phone, sending emails, doing stuff. And I remember being in the park with them after school one day, and my pastor sent me a message, and he was like, just randomly, I hope you know what you're doing without the box isn't normal, right? I hope you do know that this is something really special. And he was like, and if you ever feel like throwing in the towel, don't.
And at that point you was ready to
that day in particular, I remember that day in particular, I was like, you know what? Let me just give this up, man. Who am I fooling? What am I doing? I don't have the know-how. Give it up, Ren. And that message came through. And it wasn't just like, oh, keep it going. It was if you ever feel like throwing in the towel or feel like you want to give it up, don't. I said, it's God. That's how I know. And when I say like God being pleased, the reason that I know that it's something that he wants me to keep doing is because of the encouragement that will come when no one knows what's going on, when no one knows how I'm feeling, no one knows where I'm at in my mind. And he'll send somebody that's not attached to what I'm doing, that doesn't know my business, to encourage me. Or he'll send someone to send me a message and say, do you know what? This workshop really helped me, you know. It opened this door for me. We were doing monthly workshops, and we did one for women. I called it Boss Gal Workshop. Boss Gal Workshop. That was the first one in that installment. And we had some amazing women come and speak. And one of the ladies said, yeah, I've left my job now and I've moved into the tech world and I'm working with Microsoft. And it's just little things like that that just make me think, I cannot stop. I just have to change my systems behind the scenes. I just have to change how I'm approaching things. I just have to change how I'm coming at it and change my perspective, sort myself out a little bit.
What got you to that point of giving up? Is it because too much was weighing on you?
I think, again, it was my systems. I think I wasn't necessarily setting myself up personally to be doing it and thriving. I was burning myself out. I was stressing myself out. I'm a bit of a worrywart. I was worrying. I was doing that thing of not asking for help, not delegating properly. And can be very dramatic. I can be so dramatic. And every day felt like sometimes like, chill, man, we can't bother, just lie down in the bed. Do you know what I mean? And just not move. But sometimes the pressure was really on. And I think everyone finds that with running something right, the pressure's just on top.
And it never
unbearable.
Really lifts. And if it does, it's like...
you get a little gasp and then you go back under again. And I think I don't take it too seriously now. I think I used to take things, and I've always been like that. My mum would, you take things to heart so much, and that's just how I am. I really do wear my heart on my sleeve, and I do put my heart and my soul into things. And Out the Box is like my heartbeat. It is my heart.
It's your baby.
To the world. Do you get what I mean? And I think because of that, because there's so much emotion attached to it, then some days it just does feel harder than it needs to.
But I love that you've spoken about it, because so many of us founders and CEOs and people at the helm of something feel like that, and we don't talk about it enough. I absolutely can resonate. I feel like I've wanted to quit Eloquent 1,000 times, and it's always my husband talking me off the hill. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. After you've talked yourself from that place, then let's reason properly. And I'm like, oh, I've had enough. I don't want to do it anymore. But it's normal for us to feel like that, isn't it? It's so normal for us to want to give up. Would we be doing a good job if we didn't want to pack it in sometimes?
Well, that's it. And, you know, even so, I still work as well. I still either part-time or if I can, I'll take on full-time and then do Out the Box on the other side of it. So I'm working with, like I said, I'm working with a foundation at the moment, and they found me through Out the Box. Out the Box is a vehicle. Out the Box has to exist, and not just for other people, but for me also. So we just celebrated 10 years of the idea leaving my head and going out into the world. And I remember like writing a post about it, and I was saying Out the Box changed not just everyone else's life, but mine as well. It's opened up so much for me. It's taught me so much about myself. It's stretched me in so many ways. It's been my bread and butter. It's given me job opportunities. It's, like, and that's why I say, like, sometimes when God asks you to do something, it doesn't make sense, and you think, well, what's going to come out of this then? And you look back and you're like, wow, like, what a journey.
Similarly, we just celebrated 10 years at Eloquent.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I feel like 10 years is the hardest year that I've experienced in the business yet. I don't know what it is about year 10, but it's been a struggle. And I feel like I've had not a revelation, but like you said, we've built things that don't necessarily thrive for us. They thrive for other people. And I've had a 360 moment in the 10th year that I'm kind of like, I want to thrive now. Like, we're impacting loads of people, and that's amazing. I want us to continue in that fashion. But if the very thing we've built doesn't turn back and serve us, what's the point?
What's the point? Yeah.
What is the point? Like, if we're burnt out, if we're tired, and everybody else is like, this is great. I'm like, no, I can't continue in that fashion. And that's been a big eye-opener for me. In the 10th year, like, where was this revelation in the 5th year?
No. But the 10 years goes very fast as well. I think you don't realise how quickly it goes. And like you said, you're digging away, you're working away, you're doing your thing, you look up, it's 5 years, and you're like, oh, I still got more in me, I could do some more. And then you look and it's 10. And it's funny you said that, actually, because I'd say in the 10th year as well, it's been the quietest.
Agreed.
We've had way less activity on purpose, though. I've had to drop client work. I've had to drop certain things to give some breathing space, and to also take what the journey that me and God have been on seriously. So you know how I've said a lot's changed in how I view things and how I want to do things. I said, all right, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I think God wants us to be doing. So I need to take some time to look at how we can implement that and what that needs to look like. And you know, we're restarting the events again the end of this month, and carrying that on throughout the rest of next year onwards. But there's new things that need to come into the business and into play as well. And especially now I'm back in the West Mids, it's like the 10th year sometimes feels like we ain't really done nothing, you know, like damn. But actually it's the year that's gonna kind of like set us up for the new, and to usher in the things that me and God have been speaking about in private, basically. So
And sometimes that takes us pulling back.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to be like, it's looking like it's quiet.
Yeah.
But I'm doing some deep groundwork. And the groundwork's going to set up what the next 10 years look like.
Exactly.
Like 100% I can resonate.
Yeah.
We've definitely put the brakes on this year. And it's really me putting the brakes on to stabilize the ship to exist without me. What's the point if it needs us at the helm?
And I was just about to say, I feel like when you get to this point, it is about looking at how do I carry on building something that doesn't need me in it.
100%.
So you literally just took, like, I was literally just thinking about that.
How hard is that?
It's hard, but there's almost some relief in there, you know?
Yeah, like a sigh of relief.
Because I've always said, even like in the early years, I've always said, this isn't even for me. This is for people in their prime years to thrive. And when I say prime years, you're always in your prime, I feel like. But I mean, like, between the ages of like 18 to 35 and even a bit beyond that, it's for that age group. Like, I'm 35 now, and I'm not gonna say that no one over the age of 35 can attend our events, because we've had people that age attend and thrive from it. But I feel like there's people that are behind me that are younger than me that have so many great ideas that can be like, what about this? What about that? And I'm looking forward to making it into something that I can give to other people to operate eventually. Don't know what that looks like, but that's the train of thought I've always had in regards to removing myself. And I've had conversations with friends about the same things as well. It's like, how do you look at setting up something that doesn't need you to run? So that's gonna take a while,
a big while,
especially when you've been so embedded
and
a
face
major
of the
part.
Thing
exactly,
is so hard. Like, what that has been the biggest challenge for me this year is building a family and not being as present in the business, and the business suffering as a result of it, because people like an eloquent with myself or eloquent with my mom, and it's like, if mom's not in the thing, then I don't want to go, because they're coming for you and what you've built. So it's been, whilst that's amazing for me, I'm like, okay, well, I haven't done a good enough job leadership wise then. The past 10 years, I'm like, okay. Whilst that's a great thing, people are coming for you, I need to be better at leadership development then, because if I'm out, there still needs to be a sense of eloquent that remains in the space, if that makes sense. And that question of how do we build things that exist without us, what would you say is the first thing you need to look to do?
Setting up systems that, or even just like I call it like a playbook or a handbook, where it's just like, here's everything that this requires, take the manual and do it. And I think I have not been good with that, just because
Me and you both.
I think I do have things in place somewhat, but I think because of how I work and operate, it's a mess. So I'm not necessarily an organized person like that. I'm not. Like, some people will say I am. And maybe to an extent, but I just think, no, this is a mess. So I first need to sort my things out to be able to then handle it. Because, and I think, you know, there's some slight ADHD there. And I think because, like, my partner's always looking at my desktop and being like, how are you coping? How are you managing? If you see my desktop, there's no, you know, the background, the screen, you can't see it. There's files all over the desktop, but I know where everything is. Do you get what I mean? I know it's in the corner up there. Look, just move that and it's there, because that's how I operate. And I feel like sometimes, because of the way my brain operates, and I've always been like this, it's like, it's gonna slow me down if I try and be too organized. But I am now in the space of thinking about, okay, setting up new systems or recording things that people can look at how to do things. So for instance, when we have our events, a friend of mine who also works on Out the Box and in the business, from time to time with like up stuff and events, I've set her up now so she knows how to just, you know, simple things like setting up an event, making it, basically make sure it runs, get the speakers in line, get them ready, get them on board, the newsletters to the community. Like, she's good at all of that stuff. And that's just taking me sitting down and showing her what to do, sending her recordings of things so she can go through it and update herself on that. So that's one example. But I also feel like I'm in the space now where it's like I need some advisors.
Yeah.
That's maybe look like a board, maybe, to be like, actually, maybe these are the next steps you need to take, and putting other people in place, because that's been another thing as well. It's been like, we spoke about this at the business show, is like building a team.
So hard.
And finding your right hand person. That's been probably one of my biggest challenges, because while I do have T, who works with me on some of the ops side and some of the event side, and she's been amazing, it's like I need a second me.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing as a second
Two
you.
or three would be nice.
Yeah, a few. Yeah. So I think those are the types of things, like another type of you, or someone that has skills that you don't even have to take things to the next level. Advisors, systems. I think those are the things that I'm now thinking about
next.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love that you mentioned a bit of ADHD, and I really resonate with it, because it's so
this is
funny.
Self-diagnosed, by the way.
Me and you both.
But it's something.
But what's interesting is I was talking to my mum about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, do you know what? Talk to me again about what my school reports are saying that you and Nan rebuked. Because I need to like understand something here.
Yeah.
Romanah doesn't sit still in lessons. She's always active. She's a leader. She's disruptive. I'm hearing all of these things. She was kicked out of school, put on reports. And you guys sat and rebuked it.
Yeah.
But I'm a teacher now, qualified teacher. What were they trying to say? And it was like, well, we just weren't trying to hear it because, you know, we rebuked it, in Jesus' name. Yeah. I was like, okay, but were they trying to flag something about my character and how I was learning that would have been helpful to where I am today? It was like, yeah, potentially. So I absolutely think I've got traits too that had I known prior, I would have been able to better manage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I agree with the chaos.
It's chaos.
So unorganised.
Yeah. It's chaos. And it's organised chaos though.
Yeah, I hear it.
So I can operate in it. And sometimes I do get stressed myself out a little bit, but I can operate well in it. I think, and even I'd say it really started to trip me up a little bit when I was at uni. It's like I couldn't get my work done. Right. And it's like I couldn't sit myself down to sit and focus and steady myself on things. And I started thinking...
Easily distracted.
I was like, am I dyslexic? And obviously back then, this was like what? When did I start uni? 2007. However long ago that was. Yeah. This is a long time ago. People weren't talking about it like that then. Like, I knew like there were pamphlets around about like dyspraxia. I knew I wasn't dyslexic. And I was like, I'm a dyspraxic. But there wasn't really like a firm definition of what it was. I'm definitely not dyspraxic. But ADHD never came into the picture. So I remember being behind on a few of my assignments and going to my lecturer and being like, crying, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I just can't
get it done.
Seem to get this done, and I can't get with it. I'm struggling. Yeah. And she was so helpful. She was like, you know, I'll give you an extension, but go easy on yourself. Like, take your time and just get it in. She didn't necessarily talk to me about ADHD, but I remember at uni being like, something ain't right. Right. Like, because I'm very intelligent. I'm smart. I'm here, obviously, they accepted me on an unconditional offer. So it wasn't even about my grades. They really liked what I was about and what they were seeing from my other bits of work. So I knew it wasn't anything to do with my level of academia. Right. And I'm not necessarily an academic person, but I can manage in that sense. It was the applying myself and it was the organising myself. And I'd get into like free states a lot. And it's only like now that there's more talk around neurodivergence. Yeah. And I wouldn't, you know, and I don't know how much ADHD I am, but there's something going on. Yeah, yeah. And I think actually that's allowing me to give myself more grace. Because it's like, oh, okay. So it's not that you're abnormal. It's just that you operate differently. You think differently. You organize differently. You take things on differently. So that's, yeah.
I can resonate in a different situation of becoming a teacher. I became a maths teacher. And my first year of work was at an inner city school, whole heap of black kids, just where I needed to be. And I had this one particular maths group full of boys, and forget trying to teach them anything, they were not interested. We don't hear about no formula, no equations, no nothing. They just wanted to ramp. They couldn't focus on the thing. And I was like, you know what? I can relate. So in the staff meetings where the head teacher was like, Romanah, how are we going to target this group of boys? And, you know, how can we get them to concentrate? I was just like, they're not going to concentrate. They're bored. They're not enthused by what we're learning. So I'm proposing that you allow me to teach in this way, where let's talk about road and how you can make money in that way, and then let me equate it to maths. Let's talk about them buying a house and, you know, building wealth. And that seemed to grip them because there was a passion and an interest. But the general everyday academics, they were just like, I can't sit here and focus. But what I also found working in the school is that they were quick to label our black boys with ADHD, but our girls...
Well, apparently in girls, it's not visible. This is what I'm learning. Apparently in girls, it's harder to pick up because we're great at masking and we're great at just looking like everything's fine and kind of just getting on with it.
We're polished, innit?
Yeah, because we're taught to be that way. We're socialized in that way. So again, I don't necessarily like to just self-diagnose and add labels. But there's traits of it that I can definitely relate to, and seeing the difference between boys and girls, like you said, it's very stark. And that's only just coming out now actually as well from what I'm reading. It's like actually with girls it's harder to tell. And
teachers just miss it. Like it was just being labelled to the boys, and then seeing it in them, I was like, you know what, I can relate to the man them. Like I'm feeling how you man are feeling. I'm bored. I'm all aboard teaching it. Like it was a big eye opener, but therapy has been a massive game changer in helping me navigate how to manage it, so to speak. What has been your biggest learning through therapy?
I think my biggest learning through therapy was definitely about how I regulate my emotions, how I was regulating my emotions and how to better regulate my emotions. I think having grace with myself has been a big one in therapy. And I think even just the act of me, so I've been out of therapy for a couple of years now because I took a break because I was in therapy actively every week for 2 years. So I started in 2017 for a little bit and then went back in 2020 and stayed for 2 years straight. So I took a break.
It's expensive.
It is. Well, it is, but it's also like you do need sometimes, and I'm definitely going back soon, but you do sometimes need that breathing space to actually reflect on everything that you've been doing in therapy.
And put it into practice
and to apply it and put it into practice. So I think for me, even just the act of giving myself that dedicated time each week to work on me and to unpack and unlearn and address certain things, even that within itself was a powerful act, just to reaffirm me and validate myself. But I definitely think the things that I was addressing in therapy were more so about how my past affects how I was showing up in the world, and then also how I was relating to people as well, so relationships. And I just think the biggest element for me of what my therapist really took me through was giving myself grace and kindness to myself and absolving myself of a lot of responsibility for things that had happened that just wasn't anything to do with me or my fault. That's
freeing
been the biggest thing, and freeing myself of that. But then also, because I've always been quite emotionally intelligent, I've always been someone that reflects on myself, so hence why I was talking about the journals from like 12. I've always been I've never shied away from my emotions or how I feel, like heart on my sleeve, writing it out in my journals. But it was the organization of them, and it was compartmentalizing things so that it just didn't feel like this big heavy thing on top of me all the time.
Overwhelming.
So yeah.
What would you say is next for Renee?
What is next? Don't know. I
like that answer.
I don't know. And you know what? I stopped asking people that. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with you asking me the question, but I think to be honest with you, where I'm at now, I'm releasing myself of a lot of pressure.
Okay.
And I'm walking with my head held a little bit higher these days because I've realised I'm sitting on so much wisdom and purpose and things to talk about and things to share and give to the world. And I've been holding myself back for a long time. And, you know, I've been speaking about that time that I've been in with God. Yeah. I just feel like it's that releasing of that and opening up my mouth and speaking. I've been quiet for a long time and just being out there and not at everything and not in everything, but just being bolder and walking in like a bold season at the moment for sure, and just going for it.
I ask all my guests to do this at the end of each episode, to leave a gem for the audience, one takeaway that you feel is fitting to what we spoke about today.
I think my gem for the audience is, and I say this at everything, feel the fear and do it anyway. Don't let fear hold you back. Don't let imposter syndrome hold you back. Don't self-sabotage yourself into not doing things, and be authentically you.
Right.
Pursue authenticity with everything, because I think a lot of the reason why so many of us feel miserable sometimes is because we're not being authentically ourselves. So identify it and walk in it, and don't let anybody tell you any different.
Ren, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.